Across this country, some 80,000 prisoners are locked in solitary confinement. That form of punishment widely accepted in America ever since prison reformers pushed it as a humane alternative to hanging almost 200 years ago. But some modern reformers think it is pure torture. Practice has led to congressional hearings, UN reports, inmate hunger strikes. And to better understand the toll of forced solitude, ABC's Dan Harris volunteered to spend 48 hours in the hole.
I'm cuffed and stuffed in the back of a sheriff's vehicle.
Right in front of you. Turn around, put your hands on
This is everybody's worst nightmare.
Come on this way, please.
The further we get into this, the more real it feels.
Look directly up at the camera, please.
Okay, everything you need for the cell upstairs. Got your coffee cup, another pair of shoes, and a blanket.
I am about to enter what some have called a monster factory. We arrive at what will be my new home. It's 7 by 12 feet, all concrete and metal. I am in solitary confinement. Everybody agrees criminals should be punished, but critics say solitary is legalized torture that makes inmates more dangerous when they get out and can be 3 times as expensive as regular inmate housing. But corrections officials insist it is a necessary tool to control a dangerous population. So, to get a sense of what it's really like, we were granted an extraordinary inside look. Officials at the downtown Denver Detention Center agreed to make me an inmate for 48 hours, locked up alone in a room with only a camera to talk to.
Tell you what, when that door closes and you're in here by yourself, you have a very lonely feeling.
Pretty soon, the screaming starts.
I'm going crazy in here! This man is being locked in a room for 23 hours a day! Everything goes to
While the commotion is jarring to me,
making sure everyone's okay, making sure everyone has regular breathing going on, no one's trying to hurt themselves.
it is nothing new at all for guards like Deputy Sheriff Thomas Acey, who works the overnight shift. He makes his rounds every half hour.
This is my pod. I listen to everything that goes on in here just to have a good feeling on what's going on. But man, you hear it all.
As night falls and the lights go out, the howling and banging gets more intense.
The guy who I think is in the cell directly below me has been having a meltdown for several hours now, screaming, banging on the door of his cell.
My neighbor downstairs, also in solitary, has taken off his clothes, he's urinated all over the floor, and ripped up pages of the Bible and slipped them under his cell door. For their own safety and the safety of the inmate, the guards don't go into the cell unless the inmate is actually hurting himself.
You can't help but wonder how they're feeling. You have to take that in consideration too. When someone's acting up, you have to put yourself in their shoes. After a couple months of solitary confinement, your mind starts playing tricks on you.
Studies show the human brain actually slows down after just a week in solitary, and that lengthy sentences can do damage similar to head trauma. We are social animals. Take away human interaction, and inmates often become depressed, consumed by irrational anger, violent, and suicidal.
What's your name? What's your birthday?
Making matters even more volatile, many of the inmates who end up in solitary are already mentally ill and regularly medicated. Back in my cell, surrounded by the sounds of human suffering, with zero privacy, fluorescent light streaming in, and only a thin blanket to keep me warm, I settle in for a long, restless night. Morning arrives, and so does breakfast through a slot in the door.
I gotta say, it is virtually impossible to get an uninterrupted night's sleep here because there's so much noise.
It's hard to figure out what to do with myself. I stare off, brush my teeth, work out.
This is my mini jail issue toothbrush. This is my liquid toothpaste. This is the sink area.
I'm sure the minutes in there seem like hours.
The guards who are monitoring my every move say they're surprised by how quickly I've adopted typical inmate behavior.
He's been stretching, pacing back and forth. So kind of typical behavior, actually, of what we see, minus the screaming and the yelling.
This is my little solitary. I was just playing a game of solitaire. Solitaire and solitaire.
There are basically 3 kinds of inmates in here.
So I just did a little sketch of some mountains. That's one thing I do miss.
Those who prefer it, which is rare, like Herschel Franklin, in for first-degree assault.
I got breakfast in bed, lunch in bed, dinner in bed. I got to worry about a bunch of other guys and their problems and their whatever, you know. I'm just dealing with me. This is no game. It's definitely not a game.
Then there are those who are in here for their own protection, like my downstairs neighbor who is mentally ill. The other type of person who ends up in solitary?
How do you plead to the charges?
Plead guilty.
The rule breakers, like Dylan Head, captured here on jail cameras getting in a fight on the basketball court.
I'm okay with giving him up to 15 days.
Yeah.
As Dylan Head goes in,
I'll think about it before I get into a fight next time.
Harris, you just accompany me. We'll go to the office.
jail officials invite me for a chat, a welcome relief from my stifling cell. On my way, I step around the pages of the Bible that my neighbor ripped up overnight.
One of our worst nightmares would be to be in your situation where we were locked down like that.
Really?
Yeah, because we see this all the time, so we understand.
This is our way of keeping people safe. We're worried about people getting hurt. And some of these folks in general population would be a danger to themselves and other inmates. And this is the best tool we have.
As if to emphasize that point, our interview is interrupted by a horrifying noise.
What is that?
We'll show you what happened in a moment. Also coming up, inside the cells with the other inmates. How do they get through the day?
And that's what you hear all day. That's what you hear 24/7.
Here on the outside is a common belief that solitary confinement is only for the most hardened inmates, but not so. In some prisons, breaking basic rules or being caught with contraband will earn a prisoner time in the hole, and almost all of these men will be released back into society someday. Studies show they're actually more likely to reoffend on the outside as a result. We return now to ABC's Dan Harris, almost through his first full day of confinement, to look for clues as to why.
I've now been in solitary for 18 hours.
Morning, guys.
I'm meeting with jail officials.
It feels good to be out of that little cage, I'll tell you that much.
When we are loudly interrupted.
What is that?
It is my neighbor, the mentally ill inmate, breaking down while guards return him to his cell after a court appearance. Jail officials admit sometimes when they put people in solitary, they just get worse.
So that raises the question about whether maybe is there a better way?
That's a question that we all are asking, and I don't know what the answer is.
While here at this jail, most inmates are not in solitary for more than 60 days, in some prisons, inmates can be in for years, decades even. When I'm returned to my cell after my meeting with the guards, listen to what one of them tells me.
People moving out goes on. Thank you.
I appreciate it, thank you.
I'm back in my cell for the rest of this day of tedium, broken up only by barely edible meals.
A bologna sandwich, a little bit of lettuce, a couple slices of American cheese, some cookies. I know I've only got about 18 hours left, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how I'm going to make it through the sheer density of the boredom that being in solitary entails.
In another part of the jail, Marcel Woods passes the time by writing his mom a letter.
I just put my mom, I told her when I have trial coming up.
Marcel has been in and out of jail and prison his entire life. This time it's theft and assault charges.
Hopefully this time I learn my lesson. Because this isn't the place to be.
If you don't have this, then you go stir crazy. We listen to the news, music, sports.
August Rayfield, who swears by his jail-issued transistor radio, is in for meth possession, stolen checks, and domestic violence.
Everybody has one of these.
The other thing keeping him sane, the calendar on which he counts down the days.
10, 31, 30, 31, 31. And that's what you hear all day. That's what you hear 24/7. No way to live, huh? Don't break the law.
Back in my cell, the noise has also begun. It's my neighbor downstairs again. As I get ready for sleep, I'm wondering whether I can make it. The guards have told me I can leave at any time if I can't take it anymore, and that idea is becoming increasingly tempting. The next morning, I wake up in my tiny cell.
Personally, I can smell freedom at this point, and I am ready to get out of here.
Outside, Deputy AC makes his final rounds of the morning before his shift ends. He admits looking at the faces of men behind glass every day is not easy psychologically.
The night shift is intense. You gotta stay awake. You gotta stay active. Every day is a new story.
Every inmate gets 1 free hour outside his cell per day.
All right, shower time.
They've told me not to interact with any of the inmates,
Shower shoes, bro.
even when they taunt me.
You're gonna catch gingivitis.
I have a prepaid call from an inmate in Denver Downtown Detention Center.
During my free hour, I also get a chance to call my wife.
In terms of feeling like you're losing your mind, you had a sense of what that might be like?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely haven't felt like I'm losing my mind, but I get little glimpses of what it must feel like. I mean, I know I'm gonna get out.
Coming up, more trouble with my mentally ill neighbor. And I finally get to meet my fellow inmates and ask them, if you did the crime, shouldn't you do the time?
I don't know how much sympathy there is in the general public for people who have committed crimes.
There's none.
Prisoners in solitary confinement may have adequate food and water. Their cells may meet criteria for humane treatment, but deprived of human contact, utterly cut off from the world, that is enough for many human rights groups to consider it torture. We return now to ABC's Dan Harris, entering his final stretch in solitary.
42 hours in solitary, and my downstairs neighbor is acting up again. When guards come to get him for a court appearance, he refuses to leave. The inmate appears to be yelling for a shotgun.
Mr. Harris, pack all your stuff up, get everything together, make sure you bring all your trash out. You're being released.
Finally, after nearly 48 hours, it's the moment I've been waiting for.
I am glad that is over.
Before I leave here for good, the guards let me interview some of my fellow inmates about this experience we've now shared.
Now, the man in this place is not the same as when they came in here.
It changes you.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely.
There are some people who think solitary confinement is torture.
Yeah.
Straight up
It is.
legalized torture.
It is.
So
It's the hardest thing I ever did.
This is the hardest thing you've ever done?
By far.
I don't know how much sympathy there is in the general public for people who have committed crimes.
There's none.
You can make a case that it's good for some people who keep getting in trouble, like you, to be hit in the face with reality.
Like, if you're violent, I think you should be in here. But other than that, I don't think you should be in solitary.
It is perhaps not surprising that the criminals who are actually locked up in solitary would argue that it's torture.
We're going to turn right here.
But as I'm guided out of the jail...
People are usually in a good mood at this point in the process.
You know, majority of the people are in an ecstatic mood.
Given my stuff back...
But I think the main thing you'd be looking for would be your cell phone.
I missed my cell phone. Okay.
And allowed to change into my own clothes.
So let's just put the clothes in that hole right there.
Mixed in with the giddiness of liberty...
We'll head out this way here.
Are real questions about the cost of solitary confinement in this country. Financial, psychological, and societal.
Freedom will start once we pass this second door.
After all of this is being done in our name and on our dime. For Nightline, this is Dan Harris in Denver.